A black belt's arrogance met military precision when Kiana Moore walked into Whitmore's jiu-jitsu. Dismissed as an outsider, mocked for her gender and race, she accepted their challenge with silent confidence. 14 seconds later, local champion, Logan Bradley, lay defeated, his humiliation captured for millions to witness online. What the gym never suspected. Beneath Kiana's quiet demeanor lay Spectre, an elite operative believed dead whose combat skills had been honed in classified missions. As her viral victory exposed her identity to the world, it also alerted the shadow organization that had faked her brother's death years ago. The mat had become more than a battleground for respect. It was now the first move in a dangerous game of truth and survival. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The sound of fists hitting, pads and bodies hitting mats echoed through the parking lot as Kiana Moore sat in her car, gathering herself. Outside Whitmore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy, she took a deep breath and adjusted the plain black hoodie she wore over simple gray sweatpants. Nothing flashy, nothing to draw attention, though she knew her presence alone would do that. Kiana's dark eyes surveyed the brick building, watching people filter in and out. Mostly men, mostly white. Her fingers briefly touched the small scar above her right eyebrow, a reminder of things she'd survived far worse than whatever waited inside. She stepped out of her car and approached the entrance, pausing only briefly before pulling open the heavy glass door. The smell hit her immediately: sweat, disinfectant, and something else. Testosterone, maybe. Men's voices and laughter grew louder as she approached the front desk. A young man with close-cropped blonde hair sat behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when Kiana stopped in front of him. "I'm here to sign up," she said, her voice calm but firm. The young man, Troy, according to his name tag, finally lifted his gaze, his eyes scanning her with thinly veiled amusement. "You sure you're in the right place?" His eyes flicked over her shoulder, and he smirked at someone behind her. "I'm sure," Kiana replied. Troy shrugged, grabbed a clipboard, and slid it toward her without making eye contact. "Fill this out. Waivers on the back. Coach will decide if you're a good fit." Kiana took the clipboard and filled out the form while feeling eyes boring into her back. She could hear whispers, but she kept her focus on the paper in front of her. Name, address, emergency contact. She paused briefly before writing none. When she returned the clipboard, Troy glanced at it and snorted. "First class is free. After that, it's membership or nothing." "Understood." Kiana nodded and turned toward the main mat space. The room went oddly quiet as she entered. 20 pairs of eyes locked on her. The mat was crowded with men in various colored GIs, white, blue, and purple belts mostly. A few stopped mid-drill to stare. "Lost, sweetheart?" called out a voice from the back. A large bearded man with a blue belt laughed, nudging the guy next to him. Kiana said nothing, simply stood at the edge of the mat, waiting. A stocky man with a crew cut and a black belt wrapped around his substantial waist strode forward. Coach Whitmore, she recognized him from the website. He carried himself with the swagger of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. "Well, looks like we've got a new face," he announced, loudly enough for everyone to hear. His eyes landed on Kiana with the weight of a judgment already made. "You ever trained before?" "Some," Kiana answered, keeping it vague. Coach Whitmore's mouth twitched into something between a smile and a sneer. "Some," he repeated, glancing at his students. A few chuckled. "Well, we'll see what some means. We don't baby people here. This isn't a cardio kickboxing class." He turned to address the room. "All right, boys. Looks like we've got someone who's got something to prove today. Let's see what she's made of." The warm-up began without instruction. Kiana watched as everyone started performing a sequence of movements. Forward rolls, backward, rolls shrimping across the mat. She followed along, mimicking what she saw. Her movements were precise, controlled, perhaps too controlled for someone claiming only some experience, but no one seemed to notice. Or if they did, they didn't care. "Partner up," Coach Whitmore barked. Everyone scrambled to grab a training partner. No one approached Kiana. She stood alone as pairs formed around her. "Troy," Coach called to the front desk guy who had now joined the class. "Show our new friend the basics." Troy gave an exaggerated sigh and trudged over. "Lucky me," he muttered. The first drill was simple. One person lying flat, the other passing their guard. Troy went first, kneeling between Kiana's legs with undisguised impatience. "You put your hands here," he said, roughly positioning her arms. "And keep your legs like this. Not that it matters. I'm going to pass anyway." He drove forward with unnecessary force, his elbow digging into her thigh as he attempted to establish side control. Kiana grimaced but adjusted, making it just difficult enough for him without revealing too much. When they switched positions, she moved with fluid efficiency, nothing flashy, just clean technique. As she moved to pass his guard, using textbook pressure, Troy's face registered a flash of surprise before hardening into determination. He began using more strength, twisting and bucking to disrupt her balance. Kiana remained composed, eventually passing to side control with such smooth precision that a few nearby pairs paused to watch. "Beginner's luck," Troy grunted as they reset. The class continued with increasing intensity: burpees, bear crawls, sprawls. When they finally moved to a drilling phase, Kiana executed a shrimping movement with such technical perfection that even Coach Whitmore paused momentarily before continuing his rounds. Halfway through class, the door swung open and a tall, muscular man strode in. Unlike the others, he wore no GI, just board shorts and a rash guard that clung to his sculpted torso. The room's energy shifted instantly. Backs straightened, voices lowered. "Logan," several guys called out in greeting. Logan Bradley, Kiana, had seen his name and face plastered all over the gym's website and social media. Local champion. The gym's pride. He high-fived his way across the room before his eyes landed on Kiana. He did a double take, then made a show of looking around, her as if searching for someone else. "Yo, coach," he called out, a grin spreading across his face. "You let her join, or is this take your daughter to work day?" Laughter rippled through the room. Coach Whitmore smirked. "New blood. Says she's trained some. That right?" Logan's eyes narrowed as he sized her up. "Well, don't go easy on her then. Wouldn't want her to get the wrong idea about what real jiu-jitsu feels like." The remainder of the class was brutal. Every drill seemed designed to test endurance rather than technique. By the end, Kiana's hoodie was soaked with sweat, but her breathing remained steady, controlled. She'd endured far worse. As everyone began filtering toward the locker rooms, Kiana felt a presence beside her. A skinny young man with kind eyes and a white belt handed her a small ice pack. "For your shoulder," he said quietly. "Troy's a jerk. He went way too hard." He glanced nervously over his shoulder before continuing. "I'm Cody, by the way." "Kiana, you did good today," Cody added, barely above a whisper. "They don't say that to anyone who looks different around here." Kiana raised an eyebrow. "Different?" Cody swallowed hard. "You know, not a bro." His eyes darted toward a whiteboard on the wall that listed names in order of some internal ranking system. Not a single female name appeared in the top 20. "They make jokes about it. It's pretty messed up." "I see," Kiana said simply. "You coming back?" Cody asked. Before she could answer, a booming voice called out, "Hey, princess, you making friends with the fresh meat?" Logan stood a few feet away, toweling off his neck, staring pointedly at Cody. "Just being polite," Cody mumbled, immediately shrinking. "Sure," Logan drawled. "Real polite." He walked past them, deliberately bumping Cody's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. After showering and changing, Kiana heard snippets of conversation from the men's locker room as she passed by. "Bet she doesn't last a week. Just another Instagram chick trying to say she trains. Have you seen her ass, though?" She kept walking, her face betraying nothing. That night, in her sparse apartment, Kiana sat cross-legged on the floor beside her bed. She opened a small wooden case and removed a worn belt. Not a jiu-jitsu belt, but a military one with patches and insignia that few civilians would recognize. Her fingers traced the embroidered symbol of an elite unit that officially didn't exist. Next to it lay a photograph. Kiana in desert fatigues, arms slung around a man who shared her eyes, her smile. Both wearing the same unit patch. Her brother. "I'm not here to play," she whispered to the empty room, carefully replacing the belt in its case. 3 days later, Kiana returned to Whitmore's. She'd paid the membership fee without hesitation, ignoring Troy's surprised look when she handed over her credit card. She arrived early, wrapping her hands methodically with black tape, focusing on her breathing as other students filed in. Coach Whitmore entered with Logan trailing behind him like a favored son. Whitmore's eyes narrowed when he spotted Kiana. "Welcome back," he said, his tone suggesting he'd expected, perhaps hoped, she wouldn't return. "Hope you're ready to work today." The class began with takedown drills. Partners practiced shooting for doubles, singles, and trips. Again, no one approached Kiana until Coach Whitmore pointed to a heavy-set man with a brown belt. "Rocco, show the new girl how we do takedowns here." Rocco stepped forward, already smirking. He stood at least 6 inches taller than Kiana, his shoulders twice as broad. "Don't worry, I'll be gentle," he said loudly enough for others to hear. They slapped hands and began. Rocco immediately drove forward with a double-leg takedown that was more football tackle than technique. Kiana hit the mat hard but recovered quickly, resuming her stance without complaint. The next attempt, she sprawled perfectly, not spectacularly, not dominantly, but with just enough technical precision to make Rocco work harder. His expression darkened. When it was Kiana's turn to shoot, she performed a textbook single leg that momentarily caught Rocco off balance. He recovered by using pure strength, lifting her and dumping her roughly to the mat. "That's not the technique," she said. Quietly. "It worked, didn't it?" Rocco retorted. The class transitioned to groundwork. Coach Whitmore demonstrated an armbar from guard, then set everyone to drilling. "Remember," he called out, "control is key. Tap your partner before there's pressure. We're not trying to snap arms here." His eyes drifted pointedly to Kiana as, he added, "most of us anyway." Paired with Rocco again, Kiana found herself immediately on the defensive. He established top position and moved quickly to isolate her arm. The technique was correct, but the application was aggressive. He cranked the armbar with sudden force, grinning as he did so. Pain shot through Kiana's elbow, but she didn't tap. Instead, she executed a perfect escape, twisting her body and pulling her arm free in a movement that shouldn't have been possible given the position. Rocco's face registered shock, then anger. "Lucky move," he muttered. They reset. This time, Kiana found herself in guard position. She executed the armbar drill precisely as demonstrated, applying controlled pressure until Rocco tapped. "Again," he demanded immediately. 3 more times they repeated the drill. Each time Rocco grew more aggressive, and each time Kiana matched him with technical precision that seemed to infuriate him further. During a water break, Logan approached Coach Whitmore, speaking in a low voice while glancing repeatedly at Kiana. Coach nodded, and when training resumed, he announced they would move to live drills. "Logan and Daniel will demonstrate first," Coach said, gesturing to the mat center. Logan and a purple belt named Daniel squared off in what was clearly a choreographed sequence. Logan dominated, of course, ending with a flashy submission that drew appreciative nods from the class. "Now let's mix it up," Coach said. "Logan, why don't you show our newcomer how a real roll feels?" Logan's eyes lit up. "My pleasure, Coach." Kiana stepped onto the mat, face impassive. They slapped hands, and Logan immediately bullied forward, using his superior size and strength. As they engaged, he drove his shoulder deliberately into her collarbone, hard enough that an audible gasp escaped her lips. "That's what happens when you hesitate, sweetheart," Coach called out from the sidelines. Logan established dominant position quickly, but as he moved to solidify control, Kiana's body shifted subtly. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed advanced technique, just efficient movement that made Logan work harder than he expected. Frustration flashed across his face. He applied more pressure, more strength. Kiana adapted, never quite giving him the submission he sought, but never quite threatening him either. It was a delicate balance, showing enough skill to defend herself without revealing how much she truly knew. From across the room, a young woman with auburn hair watched intently. Rachel Whitmore, the coach's niece and one of the few female students, studied Kiana's movements with narrowed eyes. Unlike the others, she seemed to recognize the controlled precision in Kiana's technique. After several more rounds with different partners, the class moved to King of the Hill, one person staying on the mat until submitted. Cody found himself reluctantly pushed to the center. 3 consecutive opponents tapped him quickly, each victory followed by increasing jeers from the sidelines. "Maybe he should join the kids' class," someone called out. When Kiana stepped up to face Cody, the room erupted in catcalls. "Go easy on him, new girl. This ought to be good. Don't hurt her feelings, Cody." They began slowly, Kiana allowing Cody to work positions she could have easily countered. When she gained an advantage, she whispered quiet instructions. "Frame with your arm here, and that's it. Now bridge." Cody managed to escape a bad position, and surprise registered on his face. The class continued to jeer from the sidelines. "Let her take your back, why don't you? You gonna let a girl beat you?" Logan's voice cut through the noise. Pathetic. After class, Kiana lingered, retying her belt as the room emptied. She overheard voices from Coach's office, the door left slightly ajar. "She's got some training," Coach Whitmore was saying. "More than she lets on." "So what?" Logan's voice replied. "Let her have her little moment. We'll make sure her second week's her last." Kiana quietly slipped her phone from her pocket, activated the recording function, and held it close to the gap in the door. "She's not the right fit here," Coach continued. "This gym has a certain culture, a reputation." "I'll handle it," Logan assured him. "By next Friday, she'll be gone." Kiana stopped the recording and pocketed her phone just as the door began to open. She moved quickly toward the water fountain, her back to the office as Logan and Coach emerged. In the women's locker room, a converted storage closet with a single shower, Kiana found herself alone until the door opened and Rachel entered. They acknowledged each other with brief nods. As Kiana packed her bag, Rachel approached cautiously. "You've trained before," she said. "It wasn't a question," Kiana shrugged. "Some." Rachel studied her for a moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the bench to Kiana. "Open mat times," she explained. "When most of these guys aren't around. Mornings mostly. It's easier." Kiana looked at the paper, then at Rachel. "Why are you helping me?" Rachel's eyes hardened. "I'm not the only one who sees what happens here." She zipped up her bag with finality. "Just be careful. They don't like being shown up." That night, Kiana dreamed of gunfire and desert heat, her brother shouting her name as they ran for cover, the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades, a blinding flash. She woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. On instinct, her hand reached for a weapon that wasn't there. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. Sleep wouldn't return tonight. Instead, she rolled out of bed and began moving through familiar forms, shadow drilling submissions, escapes, transitions. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. For Kiana, Jiu-Jitsu wasn't just a sport. It was therapy, control in chaos, peace in violence. The next morning, she arrived during one of the times on Rachel's list. The gym was nearly empty, just a few dedicated students drilling quietly. No Logan, no Coach Whitmore, just serious training without the theater. Kiana began her own warm-up routine, moving with more freedom now that fewer eyes watched. Her technique flowed naturally, the precise foot positioning, the expert weight distribution, the economy of movement that spoke of years of training. During a positional drill, she used a rare sweep, a technique not commonly seen outside high-level competition. Her partner, a quiet blue belt, looked startled as he found himself suddenly on his back. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Around," Kiana replied, helping him up. The next day, Cody caught up with her in the parking lot after class. "I should warn you," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "People who've embarrassed Logan in the past, they don't last here. What happens to them? Kiana asked. Different things. One guy had his car keyed. Another got accused of inappropriate touching during a roll. Total lie, but it stuck. Most just get bullied until they leave. Cody kicked at a stone on the pavement. It's messed up, but that's how it works here. Why do you stay? Kiana asked. Cody shrugged. No other gym for 30 miles, and... He hesitated. I need this. I get bullied everywhere else too. Kiana nodded in understanding. Thanks for the warning. That evening, Kiana sat in her car outside. The gym long after everyone had left. The windows had fogged slightly as rain began to fall. She watched the darkened building, weighing her options. She could find another gym. There were others, further away but without the toxic culture. She could report the behavior, though she knew how such complaints typically ended, especially coming from someone like her. Or she could stay. Fight. Not just for herself. Kiana got out of her car and walked through the rain to the gym door. Using the key card she'd been issued, she let herself into the empty building. The motion sensor lights flickered on as she entered, illuminating the mat where she'd been disrespected, underestimated, and marked as unwelcome. She stood in the center, water dripping from her jacket, her resolve hardening. You don't get to scare me off, she said aloud to the empty room. I've seen real war. The next week brought a different energy to Whitmore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Kiana could feel it as soon as she walked through the door. The sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she drew near. Something was brewing. She adjusted her GI, plain white, no patches, and stepped onto the mat for the evening class. Coach Whitmore stood at the center with his arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Logan flanked him like a guard dog, constantly looking toward the door as if waiting for someone. When his eyes locked on Kiana, a predatory smile spread across his face. Gather around, Coach Whitmore called out, his voice carrying the weight of authority that brooked no argument. The class formed a semicircle in front of him. Kiana positioned herself at the edge, keenly aware of the space others maintained between themselves and her. Today's special, Coach announced, surveying the room with the air of a man who enjoyed having everyone's attention. Every so often we need to check ourselves, see where we stand. His gaze landed pointedly on Kiana. See who belongs. A ripple of anticipation moved through the group. Cody, standing a few feet from Kiana, cast her a worried glance. Challenge day, Coach continued, eliciting excited murmurs from the veterans in the room. For those who don't know, it's tradition. We pair up, put ourselves to the test. He paused for effect. Real killers against everyone else. Logan stepped forward, rolling his shoulders as if already preparing for combat. Been too long since the last one, Coach. It has, Coach agreed. He turned his attention fully to Kiana now, making no attempt to hide his condescension. It'll be a good opportunity for newcomers to see where they stand, what they're made of. He gave a theatrical sigh. Hope nobody cries when they get tapped. The comment drew snickers from around the room. Logan's laugh rose above the others. In fact, Coach continued, stroking his chin thoughtfully, let's make it interesting. He strode toward Kiana, stopping just close enough to invade her personal space. What do you say to a little wager, Miss Moore? You've been showing up, putting in time. Think you've got what it takes? Kiana met his gaze evenly. Depends on the wager. Coach Whitmore's eyes glinted with malice poorly disguised as playfulness. Simple. You face our best. He jerked a thumb toward Logan, who puffed out his chest. In a live roll, you win, you get a free year's membership. And if I lose? Kiana asked, her voice betraying no emotion. Coach's smile widened. You find a different gym, one better suited to your level. A hush fell over the room. Everyone knew what he was really saying. Get out and don't come back. Logan stepped closer, towering over Kiana. Scared. Kiana looked from Logan to Coach and back again. She knew a trap when she saw one. They'd crafted this moment carefully. The public challenge, the impossible stakes, the humiliation that was meant to follow. Deal, she said simply. The single word dropped like a stone in still water. Coach blinked, momentarily thrown by her immediate acceptance. "All right then." He recovered quickly, clapping his hands together. "Friday night, 8 o'clock. We'll make an event of it." "My funeral, right?" Kiana said dryly, repeating what she'd overheard Logan say to another student. Logan's eye twitched slightly, but his smile remained fixed. 14 seconds, sweetheart. That's all you'll last." The rest of the class proceeded with a new electric tension. Groups formed and reformed, whispers spreading like wildfire. By the end of the evening, Kiana overheard plans being made, people inviting friends to witness the spectacle. As she gathered her things afterward, she noticed Coach Whitmore taping a hastily printed flyer to the bulletin board. "Challenge night. Watch Logan Bradley defend Whitmore honor against all comers." The word comers had been crossed out and replaced with women. Below was a crude caricature of what was clearly meant to be Kiana face down on a mat. The women's locker room door swung open as Kiana was changing. Rachel entered, her face tight, with concern. "Don't do it," she said without preamble. Kiana continued packing her bag. "Bit late for that." "You don't understand," Rachel insisted, lowering her voice despite them being alone. "My uncle, Coach, he doesn't fight fair. Ever. This isn't about jiu-jitsu for him. It's about control." "I figured that out on day one," Kiana replied. "No," Rachel shook her head emphatically. "I mean, he'll do anything to win. Logan once dislocated a guy's shoulder during a challenge match. Another time, someone's water bottle got accidentally mixed with something that made him too sick to compete properly." She stepped closer. "I've been surrounded by men like my uncle my whole life. They change the rules whenever they're losing." Kiana zipped her bag closed and straightened, meeting Rachel's anxious gaze. "I've been surrounded by men like him before," she said quietly. "I'm still here." Rachel studied her for a long moment. "There's more to you than you let on, isn't there?" Kiana offered no confirmation, merely shouldered her bag. "See you Friday." Later that evening, Cody waited for Kiana in the parking lot, hunched against the cold, his breath forming clouds in the night air. "I was thinking," he began hesitantly as she approached. "Maybe we could, if you wanted, I could help you train, before Friday." He shuffled his feet. "I know I'm just a white belt, but I've seen Logan roll hundreds of times. I know his setups, his go-to moves." Kiana tilted her head, considering him. "Why would you do that?" Cody looked down, "Because what they're doing isn't right and—" He hesitated, then blurted, "I've been keeping track. Screenshots of texts, recording locker room stuff, just in case they try something dirty during your match." Kiana's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's risky." "Yeah, well," Cody shrugged, a small defiant smile forming. "Guess you're not the only one who's sick of their crap." The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation. The challenge match had taken on a life of its own. Posters appeared around the gym, each more mocking than the last. Logan had apparently done a social media video, snippets of which Kiana overheard students quoting, 14 seconds, that's all she'll last." Kiana trained alone in the pre-dawn hours, when the gym was empty save for the occasional early riser. She moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years honing her craft, no longer holding back now that no eyes were watching. Her shadow danced across the wall as she drilled transitions, escapes, and submissions. Muscle memory, from countless hours on mats far from here. On Wednesday evening, as she practiced alone, the outside door opened. Kiana paused, watching as an older black man in plain clothes entered. He wore no GI, just simple workout pants and a plain gray t-shirt. His close-cropped hair was salted with gray and a scar ran along his jawline. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition that went beyond words. He nodded once, then left without ever stepping onto the mat. The night before the match, Kiana's apartment was still and quiet. She sat cross-legged on the floor, a single candle burning before her. The wooden case that held her brother's belt lay open beside a framed photograph, the two of them in desert camo, arms around each other's shoulders, both much younger and worlds away from this place and time. "Tomorrow you'll see me again, wherever you are," she whispered. touching the edge of the frame gently. Then she closed her eyes and began to control her breathing, a meditation technique taught to her by instructors whose names were classified and whose methods were reserved for those who operated in shadows. Friday arrived with an air of spectacle. By 7:30, the gym was packed beyond capacity. People stood shoulder to shoulder around the mat area, which had been cleared to create a competition space. Someone had brought a cheap spotlight that now illuminated the center of the room. Phones were out, ready to record. Coach Whitmore strutted about like a ringmaster, shaking hands and accepting backslaps from friends and students. He wore a black polo shirt with the gym's logo emblazoned across the chest, his black belt prominently displayed around his waist, despite not planning to roll. "Where is she?" someone asked loudly as 8 o'clock approached. "Think she chickened." "Out? $50 says she doesn't show," another called. The door opened and Logan entered to cheers and applause. He wore a custom rash guard with Queen Slayer printed across the back, his expression one of absolute confidence as he fist-bumped his way through the crowd. "Let's get this over with," he announced, rolling his neck. "I've got a party to get to, and the only submission I'm interested in is from the blonde waiting for me there." Fresh laughter rippled through the room. Coach Whitmore clapped Logan on the shoulder, prideful as a father. At precisely 8 o'clock, the door opened again. The crowd parted as Kiana walked in, alone and unhurried. She wore a simple black rash guard and gray shorts, her hair pulled back tightly. Her expression revealed nothing as she made her way to the edge of the mat and began her warm-up stretches. The room quieted, a mix of anticipation and something else, something that hadn't been there before. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself, or the absolute calm in her eyes. Whatever the reason, some of the mockery had given way to curiosity. Coach Whitmore stepped to the center of the mat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming, with theatrical flair, "welcome to Challenge Night." Cheers erupted around the room. "Tonight," he continued, "we have a special contest. Our very own Logan Bradley," more cheers, "will face our newest member who seems to think she's ready for the big leagues." He gestured toward Kiana with exaggerated politeness. "The terms are simple. 1 round, no time limit, submission only." His smile turned predatory. "Winner takes all, loser walks away. For good." Logan paced at his edge of the mat, bouncing on the balls of his feet like a boxer ready to charge across the ring. Kiana stood perfectly still, her breathing steady, eyes focused on a point in the middle distance. "All right, let's get this show on the road," Coach called. "Competitors to the center." The mat squeaked under their feet as Logan and Kiana approached the center. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised to capture the moment. Coach Whitmore stood between them, one hand on Logan's shoulder in a clear display of favoritism. "I want a clean match," he said, his eyes contradicting his words as they settled on Kiana. "Tap early, tap often. There's no shame in admitting when you're outmatched." Logan smirked. Kiana remained expressionless. "Shake hands," Coach instructed. Logan extended his hand with an arrogant flourish. Kiana clasped it briefly, her grip firm but controlled. "Try not to cry when I break something," Logan whispered, leaning in close. Kiana said nothing. "Begin." Coach stepped back, and the match was on. Logan circled aggressively, feinting forward with jabbing hand movements designed to intimidate. Kiana pivoted calmly, maintaining perfect distance. The crowd began to jeer. "Stop dancing and take her down already." Logan lunged forward for a double-leg takedown, his technique aggressive but sloppy with overconfidence. Kiana sprawled precisely, stopping his momentum. Before he could adjust, she had slipped to his side, one arm threading under his neck while the other controlled his wrist. The transition was so smooth it seemed choreographed, like water flowing downhill, finding the path of least resistance. In one fluid motion, Kiana locked in a triangle choke, her legs wrapped around Logan's neck and arm, cutting off blood flow to his brain. The crowd went silent. Logan struggled briefly, his face registering shock before darkening as the blood choke took effect. He tapped frantically against her leg. Kiana released immediately. The entire exchange had taken 14 seconds. The silence in the room was absolute. Coach Whitmore's mouth hung open. Logan sat up, gasping and disoriented, his face a mask of confusion and fury. "Rematch," he demanded as soon as he could speak. "That was a fluke." Coach Whitmore recovered quickly. "Yes, a restart." She caught. "You by surprise, that's all." Kiana shrugged. "Fine." The crowd, which had been stunned to silence, now buzzed with excitement. Phones were aimed with renewed interest. Logan slapped away a water bottle offered by a teammate, rage making his movements, jerky and uncoordinated. He returned to the center of the mat, his earlier swagger replaced by deadly seriousness. "Ready?" Coach asked. Logan nodded curtly. "Begin." This time Logan was cautious, respecting the threat. He circled more carefully, looking for an opening. Kiana moved with him, her footwork precise. When Logan finally committed to an attack, a single-leg takedown, Kiana sprawled again, but this time used his momentum to pull him into guard. Logan pressed forward, trying to use his weight advantage to establish control. His face was inches from hers, teeth gritted with effort. To the untrained eye, he seemed to be winning through sheer force. That illusion lasted only moments. Kiana shifted her hips, creating an angle that compromised Logan's balance. In a sequence, too fast for most observers to follow, she established mount position, trapping one of his arms between their bodies. The armbar that followed was textbook perfect, her legs pinning his shoulders while her hips extended, hyperextending his elbow. Logan tapped instantly, the pain too intense to endure even for pride's sake. 11 seconds. The room exploded, some in shock, others in disbelief, a few in genuine appreciation of what they'd just witnessed. Cody, standing near the back, was already typing furiously on his phone, a victorious grin spreading across his face. Logan scrambled to his feet, face contorted with humiliation and rage. "She cheated!" he shouted. But even as the words left his mouth, the absurdity of the claim was evident. There had been no cheating, just skill so superior, it appeared supernatural to those who'd underestimated her. "That's impossible," Coach Whitmore muttered, his complexion ashen. "No one taps." "Logan, no one." Kiana stood calmly in the center of the mat, her breathing barely elevated. She looked at Coach Whitmore, then at Logan, then at the crowd of stunned faces. "Free year's membership," she stated simply. That was the deal. People began talking, all at once. Phones were held aloft, replaying the footage in slow motion. A few students, those who had experienced the gym's toxic culture firsthand, exchanged glances of quiet vindication. Cody pushed his way through the crowd, phone in hand. "I got it all," he said breathlessly to Kiana. Both submissions, clear as day. Logan, still seething, shoved past a group of onlookers and stormed toward the locker room. Coach Whitmore followed, his authority visibly crumbling as whispers spread through the crowd. "Who is she? Did you see how fast that triangle was?" "That wasn't beginner's luck." Rachel made her way to Kiana's side, her expression a mix of awe and concern. I don't even know what that was," she said. "But you need to be careful. Logan doesn't lose, and he especially doesn't lose like that. He's going to make this personal." As if on cue, a crash echoed from the men's locker room, the sound of metal hitting concrete, followed by cursing. Coach Whitmore's voice rose above, the din trying to calm Logan down. But the damage was done. The gym's golden boy was having a very public meltdown. "I was set up," Logan's voice carried clearly. "Nobody told me she was trained. This whole thing was rigged." Kiana began gathering her things, immune to the stares and questions now directed her way. This wasn't her first time being underestimated, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. She had made her point. Outside, the cool night air was a relief after the stuffy, tension-filled gym. Kiana walked to her car, aware of footsteps behind her. She turned to find Cody following, still clutching his phone with the evidence of her victory. "That was amazing," he said, his voice hardly above a whisper. "The way you he never stood a chance, did he?" "No," Kiana admitted. "He didn't." "Are you going to upload the video?" Cody asked. Kiana considered for a moment. Your video. Your choice. Cody nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the decision. People should see this, he said finally. Not just because of Logan, but there are other gyms like this. Other people being pushed out. Later that night, as Kiana sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, her phone buzzed with a notification. Cody had uploaded the video. By midnight, it had over 5,000 views. By dawn, 20,000. Comments flooded in. Who is this woman? Logan. Bradley just got humbled. Or seconds against a black belt? Is this real? Kiana watched the numbers climb with detached interest. Fame had never been her goal, but neither had invisibility. She had learned long ago that sometimes being seen was a tactical advantage. The next morning brought a storm of reactions. Coach Whitmore had issued a hastily worded statement on the gym's social media. Last night's challenge match provided a freak outcome that, while impressive, represents a teachable moment for all our students. Even champions have off days. We look forward to a rematch that better represents our gym's standards of excellence. The statement rang hollow, especially when paired with the growing number of shares Cody's video was accumulating. Several commenters pointed out that the off-day excuse fell flat when the supposed champion was tapped twice in under 15 seconds total. Other videos began to surface, clips from previous classes showing Logan's arrogance, coach's dismissive treatment of non-male students, the general atmosphere of the gym. Someone had compiled a greatest hits reel of toxic moments, including Logan's 14-second sweetheart taunt, juxtaposed with his humiliating defeat in exactly that time frame. Kiana arrived at the gym for morning training to find the atmosphere dramatically altered. Students nodded respectfully as she passed. A few even approached with technical questions, their previous disdain replaced by curiosity or grudging admiration. Logan was nowhere to be seen. Neither was Coach Whitmore. Rachel approached during a water break, her expression troubled. My uncle's on the warpath, she said quietly. He's trying to control the narrative, but the videos keep spreading. Logan trashed the locker room last night after everyone left, broke a mirror, knocked over equipment. Not surprising, Kiana replied. There's something else, Rachel continued, lowering her voice further. Someone commented on one of the videos. A retired military guy. He recognized you. Kiana's muscles tensed involuntarily. He called you Spectre, Rachel said, studying Kiana's reaction. Said he trained you. That people should. Good luck trying to beat her. Before Kiana could respond, her phone vibrated with a notification. An email from an anonymous address. The subject line read simply, Spectre. Excusing herself, Kiana stepped outside to read it. In privacy. The message contained no text, just an image attachment. She opened it with growing unease. It was a surveillance photo, grainy but unmistakable, of her brother. He was dressed in civilian clothes, walking through what appeared to be a market somewhere in the Middle East. The timestamp in the corner read, 07/19/2018, 6 months after he had been declared killed in action. Kiana stared at the image, her heart pounding in her ears. The world around her seemed to fade as implications cascaded through her mind. If this was real, if her brother was alive when they told her he wasn't, then everything she thought she knew about that day, about his death, about her subsequent discharge, it was all built on lies. She looked up at the gym, at the people, flowing in and out, oblivious to the earthquake that had just shifted her reality. The Jiu-Jitsu challenge, Logan's humiliation, Coach Whitmore's toxic empire, all of it suddenly seemed trivial compared to what this photo represented. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification from Cody's video, now at 100,000 views and climbing. She was going viral at the exact moment her past was resurfacing. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Someone had found her. Someone who knew who she was, what she had done, and most importantly, what had been kept from her. Kiana slipped her phone into her pocket, her mind already shifting into the tactical awareness that had kept her alive in war zones. The game had changed. This wasn't just about standing up to bullies anymore. This was about unearthing buried truths, and clearly, someone wanted her to start digging. By Monday morning, Kiana's world had shifted on multiple fronts. The video of her match against Logan had exploded online, surpassing 500,000 views. What had started as a local gym conflict had morphed into something much larger, a viral moment that spoke to anyone who'd ever been underestimated or pushed aside. Online forums dedicated to martial arts were dissecting her technique frame by frame. Some questioned her background, pointing out that her level of skill didn't develop overnight. Others connected dots that Kiana had carefully tried to keep separate. "That's Spectre," wrote one commenter who claimed to be a retired Marine. "Trained with her once, like rolling with a ghost, there but not there, always 3 steps ahead," another replied. Spectre was a rumor, special ops fairy tale. "Believe what you want," the first commenter responded. "But I saw an instructional video from a classified hand-to-hand combat program. Woman moved exactly like her. Same precision, same efficiency. If that's really Spectre in this gym video, that loudmouth never stood a chance." The thread continued, accumulating hundreds of replies as people debated the existence of a shadowy female operative, codenamed Spectre, who had reportedly trained special forces in close-quarters combat techniques. Kiana read these discussions with growing unease. She had worked hard to disappear after her discharge, new city, low profile, minimal digital footprint. Now, with one viral video, threads of her past were being pulled into public view. But the online speculation was only half of her concern. The surveillance photo of her brother dominated her thoughts. She'd spent the weekend analyzing it meticulously, the location, likely a market in northern Iraq based on the architecture, the timestamp, authentic as far as she could tell, and, most importantly, her brother's face. It was undeniably him, looking thinner and harder than she remembered, but alive, moving freely in a region where he supposedly died in a helicopter crash. Someone wanted her to know this truth. The question was, why now? The gym was oddly quiet when she arrived for morning training. A few students nodded respectfully as she entered. The atmosphere had changed, the previous mockery replaced by a wary curiosity. She noticed new faces too, people who had likely seen the video and wanted to witness Spectre in person. Coach Whitmore was conspicuously absent. According to the schedule posted at the front desk, all his classes were being covered by assistant instructors for the week. The official explanation was a family emergency, but the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. As Kiana wrapped her hands for training, Rachel appeared beside her, eyes darting nervously around the room before she spoke. "My uncle's losing it," she said in a hushed tone. "He called an emergency meeting yesterday with his senior students. Closed doors, no phones allowed." "What happened?" Kiana asked, continuing her methodical hand-wrapping. "Full meltdown." "He kept talking about regaining control of the narrative and loyalty to the team." Rachel shook her head in disgust. "Some of the brown belts are questioning him now, asking why he let things go so far with Logan, why he turned a blind eye to all the bullying." Kiana nodded but said nothing. The gym's internal politics were the least of her concerns now. "And Logan's been suspended," Rachel continued. "Officially it's a mental health break, but it's damage control. He threatened Cody in the locker room after the video went viral, said he'd make him regret putting it online." This caught Kiana's attention. "Is Cody okay?" "For now. But Logan's unstable. He's convinced himself you two set him up, that it was all some elaborate plan to humiliate him." Rachel sighed. "He keeps saying you ruined everything." After Rachel left to teach her morning class, Kiana's phone buzzed with notifications. Local news outlets wanted interviews. Podcast hosts extended invitations. 2 women's self-defense organizations asked if she would consider speaking at upcoming events. She declined them all with brief, polite messages. Fame had never been her goal. "You're turning down some good opportunities," Cody observed when she met him for coffee later that day. His face still carried the glow of vindication, his phone continuously lighting up with alerts from the video. "I'm not here to be famous," Kiana replied simply. "I'm here for the truth." Cody's expression shifted to confusion. "The truth about what?" Kiana hesitated, weighing how much to share. Cody had proven himself an ally, but her military background and her brother's apparent survival were complicated matters involving classified operations. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Well, while you're figuring that out," Cody said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he leaned across the table, "I found something interesting." He slid his laptop toward her. "I've been digging into some forms used by ex-military jiu-jitsu instructors. Look at this." On the screen was a restricted message board that should have been inaccessible to civilians. Somehow, Cody had gained entry. Threads with titles like "Spectre Sighting Confirmed" and "Project Emberlight Resurfaces" dominated the recent posts. "This Project Emberlight keeps coming up," Cody explained, scrolling through the messages. "From what I can piece together, it was some kind of covert training unit. Psychological warfare combined with advanced ground combat tactics." Kiana's face remained neutral, but her pulse quickened. Project Emberlight had been classified at the highest levels, a joint special operations program designed to create operatives who could infiltrate hostile environments with minimal support. Her brother had been recruited first. She followed, 6 months later, partly due to her natural aptitude and partly because they worked exceptionally well as a team. Officially, the project never existed, yet here it was, being discussed in fragments on a forum that Cody had somehow hacked. "You shouldn't be on these sites," she told him, pushing the laptop back. "Some of these people, they don't appreciate civilians poking around." "Too late," Cody shrugged. "Besides, they're talking about you. Don't you want to know what they're saying?" Before she could answer, her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Check your car." Kiana excused herself abruptly and walked to the parking lot, every sense on high alert. Nothing seemed immediately out of place, but as she approached her vehicle, she saw it. The windshield had been smashed on the driver's side, a spiderweb of cracks radiating from a central impact point. Tucked under the wiper blade was a folded piece of paper. She removed it carefully, using the edge of her sleeve to avoid leaving fingerprints. The note contained 5 words in block capitals. "You're not supposed to be alive." Kiana scanned the parking lot for cameras or witnesses, her mind running through possibilities. This wasn't Logan's style, too subtle, too menacing. This was professional intimidation. Someone connected to her past, wanted her scared, off balance. That night, sleep eluded her. Each time she closed her eyes, fragmented memories surfaced. That final mission in Syria, the ambush that separated her from her brother, the helicopter explosion that served as cover for whatever really happened. In her dreamlike state, details emerged that she had suppressed for years. The choppy radio transmission, her brother's voice strained but determined. "Get out now." "That's an order, Kiana." Her refusal to leave him behind. The second explosion that knocked her unconscious. Waking up 3 days later in a field hospital in Turkey, being told her brother didn't make it. The body was never recovered. Too dangerous to retrieve, was the official line. She had accepted the narrative because the alternative was too painful to consider, that she had abandoned him, that he might have survived if she'd done something differently. But now, with the surveillance photo as evidence, a new possibility emerged. What if the entire scenario had been manufactured? What if her brother's death had been falsified for reasons unknown? Morning found Kiana driving to a nondescript house in the suburbs, 40 miles from the city. The home of retired intelligence officer James Griggs, a man who had once been her handler within Project Emberlight. Griggs answered the door on the 3rd knock. Time had weathered him, adding lines to his face and gray to his temples, but his eyes remained the same, sharp, assessing, revealing nothing. "Took you long enough," he said by way of greeting, stepping aside to let her in. His living room was spartanly furnished, a couch, a recliner, a coffee table stacked with books on military history. No photos on the walls, no personal touches. The home of a man who never fully left the shadows. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest," Griggs remarked, pouring coffee into plain mugs. 14 seconds. Impressive, but not exactly keeping. A low profile. "I didn't come about the video," Kiana said. No. Griggs handed her a mug. You came about your brother. Kiana removed her phone and showed him the surveillance photo. Griggs studied it without surprise, as if he'd been expecting. This exact development. Is it real? She demanded. Griggs sighed heavily, setting his coffee down. Yes. The simple confirmation hit Kiana like a physical blow. She had suspected, hoped, feared, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that shook her to her core. How long have you known? I had suspicions from the beginning, Griggs admitted. The retrieval operation was shut down too quickly, the paperwork processed too efficiently. When your name showed up in an unauthorized resurrection database 18 months later, I was certain. Unauthorized resurrection? Kiana repeated. Intelligence term for operatives brought back into service after being officially declared dead or discharged, Griggs explained. Your brother's name was flagged in a system I still have access to. Someone reactivated him for off-books work. Why? Kiana's voice wavered for the first time. Why fake his death? Why lie to me? Griggs studied her face. Leverage, he said. Simply. You were the more valuable asset, better instincts, better adaptability. But you were also more independent, harder to control. Your brother was your weak point. My guess? They separated you, faked his death, then used him as insurance to keep him compliant for whatever they needed him for. Who's they? That's the real question, isn't it? Griggs leaned forward. Project Emberlight officially disbanded after your brother's death. But operatives like you two don't just get discarded. My bet is a splinter group, private contractors with government connections. They're using your skill sets without the oversight. I need to find him, Kiana stated, firmly. And that's exactly what someone wants, Griggs countered. Think about it, Kiana. Why send you that photo now? Why wait until you've gone viral? Someone's manipulating you, setting up a board where all the pieces are in motion. That evening, Kiana sat alone on the empty mat of Whitmore's gym. She had used her membership card to enter after hours, needing the space to think. The revelation about her brother had shifted everything. What had started as a simple desire to train at a local gym had morphed into something far more complex, a conspiracy involving her past and, potentially, her future. She tied her belt with deliberate precision, finding comfort in the familiar, ritual. Whether by design or coincidence, forces from her military life had converged with her present. The video had made her visible again, to allies and enemies alike. They wanted me to disappear, she whispered to the empty room. But I'm still here. Her resolve hardened as she looked around the space where she had been ridiculed, underestimated, and ultimately, where she had triumphed. Now, I'm going to make some noise. The week that followed brought seismic shifts to Whitmore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Attendance had spiked as curious practitioners from across the city came to train where Spectre had emerged. Coach Whitmore remained conspicuously absent, with rumors circulating that he was meeting with lawyers about the gym's suddenly tarnished reputation. Kiana maintained her routine, training early mornings and late evenings, avoiding the crowds while focusing on her own regimen. The surveillance photo of her brother and Griggs' revelations had sharpened her purpose. Someone had manipulated events to bring her back into the open. She needed to be ready for whatever came next. One evening, as she was drilling transitions, alone, she sensed someone watching. Rachel stood at the edge of the mat, dressed in a GI, observing with intent focus. Mind if I join you? Rachel asked. Kiana nodded, and Rachel stepped onto the mat. They bowed to each other, a formality often skipped at Whitmore's but one that Kiana always observed. I want to see what you can really do, Rachel said, settling into a guard position. No holding back this time. Kiana raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Absolutely. What followed was less a sparring session and more a demonstration. Rachel was skilled, a legitimate purple belt with solid technique. But against Kiana, she stood no chance. Every attack Rachel initiated was countered before it fully developed. Every defensive position was systematically dismantled. Kiana moved with a calculated precision that seemed to anticipate movements before they happened. After 20 minutes, Rachel tapped for the 6th time and lay on her back, breathing hard, a mix of exhaustion and wonder on her face. "I believe you now," she said between breaths. "Believe what?" Kiana asked, offering a hand to help her up. "That you're not just some random person who happened to beat Logan." Rachel accepted the hand and rose to her feet. "You're something else. Entirely." They sat together at the edge of the mat, drinking water in companionable silence before Rachel spoke again. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice dropping. "About my uncle." Kiana waited, sensing the seriousness in Rachel's tone. "I think he's involved in something bad, beyond just running a toxic gym." Rachel glanced toward the office, ensuring they were still alone. "Last week I was looking for tape in his office and found a burner phone in his desk drawer. It was unlocked. There were messages." "You shouldn't have looked," Kiana interrupted, instantly alert to the danger Rachel might have put herself in. "Maybe not, but I did." Rachel's jaw set determinedly. The messages mentioned someone named Colonel Avery. Coordinating payments, scheduling meetings. At first I thought it might be some kind of drug thing, but... She hesitated. "I've heard stories about an Avery in MMA circles, like an urban legend. Someone who places bets on fights that never appear in official records." Kiana kept her expression neutral, but internally, alarms were sounding. Colonel Marcus Avery had been the commanding officer of Project Emberlight, a man whose ambition exceeded his ethics. If he was in contact with Coach Whitmore, it couldn't be coincidence. "Be careful, Rachel," Kiana warned. "If what you're suggesting is true, these aren't people you want noticing you." "Too late," Rachel replied grimly. "I've been noticing things for months. The random cash deposits to the gym account. The private sessions my uncle holds after hours with people who never train during regular classes." She took a deep breath. "I think this place is a front for something else. And I think Logan knows about it. It's why my uncle protected him for so long, no matter how toxic he got." The revelation aligned with pieces Kiana had been assembling. Coach Whitmore's gym, strategically located with good security and irregular hours, would make an ideal meeting point for operatives needing cover. The toxic culture he fostered ensured high turnover of legitimate students, making it harder for anyone to notice patterns over time. "What are you going to do about it?" Kiana asked. Rachel's answer surprised her. "I was hoping you'd tell me, because I get the feeling you know more about this Colonel Avery than you're letting on." Over the next few days, Kiana observed a transformation in the gym's dynamics. With Coach Whitmore still absent and Logan suspended, the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Students who had previously kept their heads down began speaking up, sharing techniques, helping each other improve. A natural rebalancing was occurring. During this time, Kiana began working more closely with Cody. She saw in him not just an ally but potential, a quick mind, good instincts, and a genuine desire to improve. Under her guidance, his jiu-jitsu progressed rapidly, but she taught him more than just techniques. She shared breathing exercises that helped maintain calm under pressure, awareness drills that sharpened his perception, and mindset principles that built mental resilience. "How did you learn all this?" Cody asked one day after a particularly intense session that had left him exhausted but exhilarated. "Experience," Kiana answered simply. "Military experience," Cody pressed, unwilling to let it go. "Special forces, right? That's what everyone's saying online." Kiana neither confirmed nor denied, but her silence was answer enough. "I knew it," Cody grinned. "That's why you came to Whitmore's, isn't it? You knew something was going on here." "I came to train," Kiana corrected him. "Everything else developed." As the week progressed, Coach Whitmore attempted to regain control of his narrative. He released a promotional video across social media platforms, standing in his black belt at the center of the mat, face serious but confident. "As many of you have seen, one of our newer members recently displayed exceptional skill during a training session," he began, carefully avoiding mention of the challenge match or Logan's humiliation. "At Whitmore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy, we pride ourselves on recognizing and nurturing talent. Kiana Moore's abilities are a testament to the quality of our training environment, where even experienced practitioners can refine their skills." The video continued with Coach claiming partial credit for Kiana's development, suggesting he had seen her potential from the beginning and had been privately coaching her toward success. The online community wasn't buying it. Comments flooded, in questioning the timeline, pointing out inconsistencies with earlier videos, and directly challenging Coach's version of events. Some posted screenshots from earlier social media posts where he had made disparaging remarks about women in combat. Sports.Coach's attempt at damage control was failing spectacularly. The following day, Cody released his countermove, a fully edited version of the challenge match video, this time including audio clips from before and after the main event. Coach Whitmore's voice rang clearly through computer speakers across the country. "Let's see if people like her can hang with the real killers. Hope she doesn't cry when Logan puts her in her place. She needs to learn humility. No woman walks into my gym and disrespects what we've built here." The new video went viral even faster than the original, this time accompanied by discussions about toxic masculinity in martial arts, racial barriers in combat sports, and the abuse of power by instructors. Within days, a major MMA gear brand that had sponsored Whitmore's gym for years announced they were terminating their partnership, citing values misalignment. Several advanced students publicly announced their departure for other training facilities. The gym's carefully cultivated reputation was collapsing. Meanwhile, the speculation about Kiana's background intensified. A former SEAL appeared in a YouTube documentary titled "Who is Spectre?", where he discussed a classified hand-to-hand combat program that had supposedly recruited one of the youngest black women ever to serve in special operations. While he never named Kiana directly, the implication was clear. Spectre was real, he stated to the camera. "I saw her dismantle guys twice her size using techniques that looked simple, but were impossible to counter. It was like fighting someone who could read your mind 3 moves ahead." The world now knew, or thought they knew, who Kiana Moore really was. For someone who had spent years living under the radar, the exposure should have been uncomfortable. Instead, Kiana recognized it as an opportunity. If her emergence had been engineered to draw her back into some game controlled by Colonel Avery, she could use the visibility to force his hand. She just needed to figure out his endgame before he realized she was playing her own version. On Thursday morning, Kiana received another anonymous email. Unlike the previous one with the surveillance photo, this message contained text, "You want the truth? Come find it." Attached were GPS coordinates for a location approximately 3 states away. Basic intelligence protocol dictated caution. This had all the markings of a trap. But if her brother was being held at or near those coordinates, caution became a luxury she couldn't afford. She was plotting possible approach routes on a map when Cody called. "Have you seen the news?" he asked, without preamble. Coach just announced. "He's selling the gym, says he's pursuing other opportunities that align with his expertise." "Convenient timing," Kiana observed. "Yeah, and get this, he's leaving town tonight. Rachel overheard him booking a flight." The pieces clicked into place. Coach Whitmore wasn't just running from the gym's collapse, he was being extracted. Colonel Avery was cleaning house, removing assets that might connect back to him, which meant the invitation in Kiana's email was more than a trap. It was bait. "Cody," she said carefully, "I need to go somewhere. It might be dangerous." "The coordinates from the email?" he asked immediately. Kiana paused, surprised. "How did you know about that?" "I've been monitoring your email since you told me about the first message with your brother's photo," Cody admitted sheepishly. "I set up alerts for anything coming from anonymous addresses. Under normal circumstances, such an invasion of privacy would have been unacceptable. But these weren't normal circumstances, and Cody's initiative, while presumptuous, demonstrated both his technical skills and his loyalty." "Yes, the coordinates," Kiana confirmed. "I'm leaving tonight." "You can't." "Go alone," Cody insisted. "It's obviously a setup." "Obviously," she agreed. "But it's also my only lead." When she arrived at her apartment to pack, Rachel was waiting outside her door. Her expression was a mix of determination and fear. "Cody called me," she explained. "Said you're going after Colonel Avery. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," Kiana replied, unlocking her door. Rachel followed her inside uninvited. "My uncle is involved in this. Whatever this is, I need to know how deep it goes. You've done enough by warning me, Kiana countered, pulling a duffel bag from her closet. This isn't a jiu-jitsu tournament, Rachel. These people are dangerous. So, am I? Rachel insisted, though her voice wavered slightly. Besides, I can drive. 3 states is a long way, and taking shifts would be safer than you driving straight through. Before Kiana could argue further, another knock came at the door. Cody stood in the hallway, a backpack slung over one shoulder. I figured you'd try to leave without me, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. So I packed and came straight here. Kiana looked from Rachel to Cody, recognizing the determined set of their jaws. These weren't hardened operatives, just ordinary, people who had chosen to stand with her when it mattered. There was strength in that, even if it complicated her approach. This isn't a road trip, she warned them both. Where I'm going, what I'm doing, it's connected to things you don't understand. So help us understand, Rachel challenged. Kiana considered her options. Going alone would be tactically simpler, but potentially more dangerous. Having allies, even inexperienced ones, meant additional eyes, additional perspectives, and most importantly, witnesses if things went wrong. If you come, she said finally, you follow my instructions exactly. No questions, no hesitation. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide. Her gaze intensified. Is that clear? Both nodded solemnly. One more thing, Kiana added. Whatever happens, whatever you see or hear, some of it can never leave the 3 of us. There are secrets involved that aren't mine alone to share. Again, they nodded their agreement. As dawn broke the next morning, Kiana, Rachel, and Cody left the city in Rachel's SUV. Their destination was a remote location that Google Maps identified only as former military storage facility, a decommissioned site that officially had been abandoned years ago. Before leaving, Kiana had returned briefly to Whitmore's gym. In a symbolic gesture that was as much for herself as anyone else, she folded her GI neatly and placed it in the center of the mat, her belt laid across it. She was done hiding, done playing by others' rules. She was going back to where the lie began, to the shadows where her brother had been taken, where Project Emberlight had twisted skills meant to protect into tools for control. Back to face Colonel Avery and whatever truth he was dangling before her, and this time she wasn't alone. Heat waves shimmered across the desert landscape as Rachel's SUV approached the coordinates from the anonymous email. They had driven through the night, taking shifts at the wheel while Kiana briefed them on what to expect. Or rather, what not to expect. Nothing will be as it seems, she had explained during the journey. If this is connected to Project Emberlight, there will be layers of deception. Trust only what you can verify with your own eyes, and even then, be skeptical. Now, as they crested a ridge, a facility came into view in the valley below. From a distance, it appeared abandoned. Chain-link fencing rusted in the desert sun. Concrete buildings weathered by time and neglect. No vehicles were visible, no movement detected, yet Kiana's posture immediately tensed. Active security, she noted, pointing to barely perceptible devices mounted on fence posts, cameras disguised as broken equipment, motion sensors in the gravel perimeter. How can you tell? Cody asked, squinting through the windshield. The dust patterns, Kiana replied. They've been disturbed regularly, and the power has to come from somewhere. She directed Rachel to park behind an outcropping of rocks half a mile from the main entrance. From there, they observed the compound through binoculars Kiana had packed. What now? Rachel asked after 20 minutes of silence. As if in answer, a section of fence near the main gate began to move, rolling back to create an opening. No alarms sounded. No guards appeared. They're inviting us in, Kiana observed, her voice flat. It's obviously a trap, Cody stated. Obviously, Kiana agreed. But a trap reveals the trapper's intentions, and right now, intentions are all we have to work with. They approached cautiously, Kiana leading the way with Rachel and Cody following several paces behind as instructed. The gate remained open, A silent invitation into a facility that officially didn't exist. As they crossed the threshold, the gate closed automatically behind them with a soft mechanical whir. The sound of their footsteps on gravel seemed unnaturally loud in the desert stillness. The main building loomed ahead, a 3-story concrete structure with narrow windows like watchful eyes. The entrance was a simple metal door, unmarked except for faded yellow hazard stripes along the bottom edge. Before they reached it, the door swung open. A man dressed in black tactical gear stepped out, combat boots, cargo pants, and a fitted t-shirt that revealed muscular arms covered in faded tattoos. His face was weather-beaten, eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the building's shadows behind him. "You were expected, Spectre," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble that suggested years of command. Kiana showed no reaction to the code name, her expression remaining neutral. "By whom?" The man's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Those who remember Project Emberlight." He glanced at Rachel and Cody. "Though your companions were not part of the invitation." "They go where I go," Kiana replied firmly. The man studied them for a long moment before nodding once. "Your call, but not everyone's happy you came." He turned and re-entered the building, clearly expecting them to follow. The interior was dimly lit and surprisingly cool after the desert heat. Their footsteps echoed on concrete floors as the operative led them through a series of corridors. The facility had clearly once been a significant operation. Doors branched off, leading to what appeared to be barracks, training rooms, and storage areas. Most were empty now or contained only broken furniture and discarded equipment. But certain sections showed signs of recent use: clean floors, functioning lights, the hum of climate control systems. "What is this place?" Rachel whispered. "Officially it doesn't exist," the man replied without turning around. "Used to be. A black site for special projects, the kind that needed distance from oversight. Now it's a ghost. Used only when necessary." They descended a staircase to a sub-level that felt more active than the floors above. The lighting was better, the air fresher. They passed a room filled with defunct technology, old monitors, servers with blinking lights, surveillance equipment from an earlier era. In one room, Kiana paused. On a bulletin board hung a faded photograph, a team of operators in desert. Camo faces blurred except for 2. Kiana's younger self stood at the end of the line. Next to her, unmistakably, was her brother. "Keep moving," their guide instructed, but his tone had softened slightly. The corridor ended at a reinforced door with a modern security pad, an incongruous piece of current technology in the otherwise dated facility. The man placed his palm on the scanner, and after a moment's verification, the door slid open. Inside was a command center, walls lined with screens displaying various camera feeds, satellite imagery, and data streams. A large table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs that suggested this was a place for briefings or planning sessions. At the head of the table sat a man in his 60s, silver-haired and immaculately dressed in a suit that seemed out of place in the desert facility. His posture was military straight, his eyes sharp and calculating as they tracked Kiana's entrance. "Sergeant Moore," he greeted her, using her formal rank from years ago. "Or do you prefer Spectre these days? Your recent fame seems to have revived the legend." "Colonel Avery," Kiana replied coolly. Rachel and Cody exchanged glances, clearly recognizing the name from their earlier discussions. Colonel Marcus Avery gestured to the seats across from him. "Please, we have much to discuss." Kiana remained standing. "Where's my brother?" Avery's expression revealed nothing. "Direct as always. One of the qualities that made you exceptional in the field." He folded his hands on the table. "Your brother is alive, as you've recently discovered. His location, however, is not within these walls. Then why am I here? Because you need to understand the situation before actions are taken that cannot be undone." Avery nodded toward one of the screens where a satellite image appeared, a compound surrounded by desert, similar to their current location but clearly elsewhere. "He's being held here, technically secure, technically outside U.S. soil, which places him in a jurisdictional gray area that is proven convenient." "Convenient for whom?" Kiana's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. For those who found value in his particular skill set, Avery replied. The same people who found you too unpredictable, too principled to be useful after certain mission parameters, evolved. You mean after Project Emberlight went from defensive training to assassination? Kiana stated flatly. Avery didn't deny it. Terminology aside, the project's scope expanded. Your brother adapted. You resisted. Decisions were made. You faked. His death to control me, Kiana said, the pieces finally fitting together. Made me believe I'd left him behind. A tactical decision, Avery responded, unrepentant. Your emotional connection made you vulnerable. We leveraged that vulnerability. For what purpose? Avery leaned forward. To keep you in check. As long as you believed he died in that operation, an operation you survived, you carried the weight of perceived failure. It kept you quiet, kept you from asking too many questions. Until now, Rachel interjected, unable to remain silent. Avery's gaze shifted to her, assessing. Yes, until now. Which brings us to our current situation. He returned his attention to Kiana. I have a proposition, a way for you to see your brother again. I'm listening, Kiana said cautiously. 1 year of service. Your particular talents are needed for a series of operations. Complete them successfully, and your brother walks free. Both of you, pardoned and cleared of any obligations to the program. Cody stepped forward. Don't trust him. This is exactly what I decline, Kiana interrupted, her voice steady. Avery's expression darkened. Consider carefully, Sergeant. This is a one-time offer. I've considered. My answer is no. Kiana's stance shifted subtly. A movement, recognizable to anyone trained in close-quarters combat, as preparation for action. My brother was taken under false pretenses. I was manipulated with a lie. Whatever operations you're running now, they're not sanctioned, not official. Official is a fluid concept in our line of work, Avery replied, his tone hardening. Perhaps you need motivation to reconsider. His eyes moved deliberately to Rachel and Cody. Your new friends, for instance, they've heard and seen quite a lot today, in a world of classified information that makes them problematic. Unintended casualties happen all the time in this business. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Kiana's hands clenched at her sides, a barely perceptible tension running through her frame. That's your mistake, Colonel, she said softly. You still think I'm the soldier who follows orders, who respects the chain of command. She took a step forward. I'm not that person anymore. What happened next unfolded, with bewildering speed. 2 operatives who had been stationed by the door moved to secure Rachel and Cody. Simultaneously, Avery reached beneath the table, likely for a weapon or alarm. Kiana's reaction was immediate and devastating. She intercepted the first operative, with a palm strike to the throat, followed by a sweep that sent him crashing into his partner. As both men struggled to regain their footing, she closed the distance to Avery, securing his wrist in a lock that prevented him from completing whatever action he'd intended. Rachel, Cody, out, service tunnel, left from the main corridor, she shouted, maintaining control of Avery while simultaneously retrieving something from his jacket pocket, a key card, and what appeared to be a small hard drive. Rachel grabbed Cody's arm and pulled him toward the door as 4 more operatives rushed into the room. Kiana released Avery with a shove that sent him sprawling across the table, then engaged the new threats with controlled, efficient movements. Unlike the exhibition at the gym, this was Kiana operating at full capacity. Each movement flowed into the next, using her opponent's momentum against them, targeting vulnerable points with precision strikes. She disabled 2 men with joint locks that left them writhing on the floor, dodged a baton swing from a third, and used a nearby chair to create distance from the fourth. Through the chaos, Rachel and Cody managed to escape into the corridor. Kiana followed moments later, slamming the reinforced door and using Avery's keycard to lock it from the outside. This way, she directed, leading them at a run through the maze-like facility. Alarms began blaring as they located the service tunnel, a narrow maintenance passage that sloped gently upward toward what appeared to be a secondary exit. The tunnel was dimly lit by emergency lighting that cast long shadows as they ran. Behind them, shouted commands and the sound of pursuing. Footsteps grew louder. "They're catching up," Cody gasped, clearly struggling to maintain the pace. "Almost there," Kiana assured him, pointing ahead to where daylight filtered through a grated opening. They emerged into the desert heat, 100 yards from the main fence. Rachel's SUV was visible in the distance, partially hidden by the rock formation where they'd left it. As they sprinted across the open ground, the sound of an engine roared to life behind them. A black armored vehicle burst through a concealed garage door in the facility's side, kicking up dust as it accelerated in pursuit. Through the tinted windshield, Colonel Avery's face was visible, his expression contorted with rage. "He's getting away," Rachel panted as they reached her vehicle. "Let him," Kiana replied, her eyes tracking the armored car as it bypassed them, heading instead for the main road. "He thinks he's won, but he's just shown us what matters to him." As they climbed into the SUV, Avery's vehicle disappeared over a ridge, but not before he'd rolled down his window enough to shout a final taunt. "You can't undo what you were trained to be. You are mine." Kiana's expression hardened as she held up the hard drive she'd taken from his pocket. "Not anymore." They were halfway back to the main road when Kiana suddenly instructed Rachel to stop the vehicle. She climbed out, removed something small from her pocket, and pressed several buttons in sequence. "What is that?" Cody asked as she returned to the car. "Insurance policy," Kiana replied. "Remote detonator, standard issue for certain operations." Behind them, a series of explosions rocked the facility. Flames erupted from multiple points, black smoke billowing into the desert sky. The compound that officially didn't exist was being systematically destroyed. "You just blew up a government facility?" Rachel asked, her voice a mix of awe and horror. "No," Kiana corrected her. "I just destroyed evidence of an unsanctioned operation on abandoned property. There's a difference." They drove in silence for many miles, each processing what had transpired. The reality of their situation was settling in. They had directly opposed a man with significant resources and connections, a man who now had every reason to view them as threats. "What happens now?" Cody finally asked as the desert gave way to the outskirts of civilization. Kiana stared out the window, her reflection in the glass revealing a determination that had crystallized through conflict. "Now we find my brother." The city skyline appeared on the horizon 3 days later as they completed the final leg of their journey home. They had taken a circuitous route, switching vehicles twice and staying in cash-only motels under false names, precautions Kiana insisted upon. During those days, she had explained more about Project Emberlight, her brother, and the circumstances that had led to their current situation. Not everything. There were still classified elements she wouldn't discuss, but enough for Rachel and Cody to understand the stakes. The hard drive they'd recovered contained operational files, personnel, records, and most importantly, detailed information about the facility where her brother was being held. It wasn't enough to mount a rescue, but it was a start, evidence they could potentially leverage. As they entered the city limits, an odd sense of displacement settled over them. After what they'd experienced, returning to normal life seemed surreal. "The gym will be different," Rachel observed as they passed familiar streets. "Word's out that my uncle's gone. Almost half the students have already canceled their memberships." "What will you do?" Kiana asked. Rachel considered for a moment. "I've been thinking about that. The space is paid up for another 6 months. Someone needs to keep it running, even if just to transition the remaining students somewhere else." When they finally reached Whitmore Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy, they found it nearly deserted. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Classes temporarily suspended." Inside, the front desk was unmanned, the mats empty. Kiana's folded GI remained where she had left it, untouched, like a statement waiting for a response. The following weeks brought slow but significant changes. Rachel, with financial help from several senior students, began proceedings to take over the gym's lease. The Whitmore name was removed from signage, replaced temporarily with Mat 14, a reference that brought knowing smiles to those familiar with Kiana's viral moment. Meanwhile, Cody's role evolved from student to instructor. His technical knowledge, combined with the confidence he'd gained through recent events, made him an effective teacher, particularly with younger students and those who struggled with bullying. Experiences he understood firsthand. Kiana maintained a lower profile, training during off hours while pursuing leads from the hard drive. She had made contact with trusted former colleagues, sharing selected information about Colonel Avery's unsanctioned operations. The wheels of accountability were turning, slowly but inevitably. 4 weeks after their return, news broke that a former military officer had been arrested on charges of financial crimes. The reports made no mention of Project Emberlight or unauthorized operations, focusing instead on money laundering connected to private military contracts. But Kiana recognized it for what it was, the beginning of Avery's downfall. The arrest made barely a ripple in public consciousness, but within certain circles it sent shockwaves. Coach Whitmore, who had relocated to another state, found himself unexpectedly without protection. His connections severed, his reputation in tatters. He became just another fallen instructor with a toxic legacy. Logan's fate followed a different path. After weeks of silence, he reappeared at the National Jiu-Jitsu Expo, an annual event that drew competitors and spectators from across the country. To everyone's surprise, Kiana had accepted an invitation to demonstrate techniques at the Unauthorized event. Her appearance created a buzz that filled the main hall to capacity. Spectators pressed against barriers, phones raised to capture footage of the woman who had become a symbol of skill, overcoming arrogance. As she prepared to begin her demonstration, a commotion at the entrance drew attention. Logan pushed his way through the crowd, his face set in grim determination. "I want a rematch," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Right here, right now." The crowd reacted with a mixture of shock and excitement. Event organizers conferred hurriedly, clearly unprepared for this development. Kiana studied Logan carefully. Physically, he looked different, leaner, more focused. The cocky swagger had been replaced by something more grounded. His eyes, once dismissive when they looked at her, now held a wary respect. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly as he approached the mat. "I've been training for this since that night," Logan replied, his voice stripped of its former arrogance. "I need to know if it was a fluke." Kiana considered him for a moment, then nodded. "Different rules this time. 5 minutes, point system, technical jiu-jitsu, not ego," Logan agreed. And after a brief consultation with officials, the impromptu match was sanctioned. Unlike their first encounter, this match was not a quick submission. Logan had clearly studied her style, prepared counters to her techniques, and developed a strategy. He fought with determination rather than bravado, earning respect from the crowd with each exchange. Kiana matched his intensity with calm precision. Where he had power, she had timing. Where he had studied counters, she had depth of experience. The match extended the full 5 minutes, with Kiana ultimately winning by advantage points rather than submission. When it ended, both competitors were breathing hard, sweat-soaked but uninjured. Logan, to the surprise of many, extended his hand without prompting. "Good match," he said, genuine despite the defeat. Kiana accepted the handshake. "You've improved." After a moment's hesitation, Logan added, "I still don't like you." "You don't have to," Kiana replied. "Just respect the art. Respect your training partners. The rest doesn't matter." Following the match, event organizers invited Kiana to speak briefly. Standing at center mat with dozens of phones recording, she addressed not just those present but the wider community who would inevitably see the footage. "I came to train not to prove a point," she began. "But sometimes the mat reveals truths we need to face. About skill, about character." Her gaze swept across the room. "About systems that protect the wrong people for the wrong reasons." She spoke about the culture of exclusion she had encountered, not just at Whitmore's but throughout her journey in martial arts and beyond. About instructors who abused their positions, students who confused dominance with skill, and the silent majority who enabled both through inaction. "I fought in silence for a long time," she concluded. "No more. This art deserves better. We all Do. The speech was met with a standing ovation, not just from those who had followed her story, but from countless practitioners who had experienced similar challenges. In that moment, what had begun as a personal stand against disrespect had evolved into something larger, a call for genuine change within a community long overdue for reflection. In the weeks that followed, Rachel officially reopened the former Whitmore Academy under its new name, Mat 14 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The space had been transformed, walls repainted, toxic messaging removed, and a new mission statement prominently displayed: skill, respect, community. The first day of classes drew a diverse group of students, many of whom cited Kiana's story as their inspiration for beginning their jiu-jitsu journey. Rachel led the instruction with a teaching style that emphasized technical understanding over blind compliance, a direct rejection of her uncle's approach. Cody's confidence had blossomed. He now taught the children's classes, focusing particularly on anti-bullying techniques and fostering resilience. The shy, intimidated white belt had transformed into a coach who understood precisely how to build up those who felt smaller than their challenges. One evening, as Kiana finished a training session with advanced students, the front desk attendant approached with an envelope. "Special delivery," he said. "Guy said to give it directly to you." Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photo showed her brother, alive and well, holding a newspaper dated that morning. The note contained a single line: "Now the real game begins." Kiana studied the image, recognizing the coded message contained within: specific finger positions, the angle of the newspaper, elements that would be meaningless to most, but that conveyed vital information to someone with their shared training. Her brother was communicating his location, and more importantly, that he had agency in whatever came next. Colonel Avery's arrest had disrupted the operation holding him, created an opportunity. The game had indeed begun, but not the one Avery had intended. This was a different contest entirely, one where Kiana and her brother would write the rules. The following morning, Kiana sat alone in a quiet meditation room at Mat 14. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating the simple space. She wore her jai, no belt, just the white uniform that symbolized both beginning and essence. Her eyes closed, her breathing steady. She centered herself for what lay ahead. The path forward would not be easy, but for the first time in years, it was clear. Her brother was alive. Avery's operation was compromised. The web of manipulation that had entangled them both was unraveling. As she opened her eyes, the door slid open. Rachel and Cody stood at the threshold, along with several students who had become allies during recent events. They lined up along the edge of the mat, a silent testament to the community that had formed through shared adversity. Kiana rose, meeting their expectant gazes with quiet resolve. "I'm not a belt," she said softly, echoing words she had once whispered to herself. "I'm not a rank. I'm what they tried to bury." She stepped onto the mat as they formed a line behind her, ready to follow wherever this journey led next. The image held for a moment, Kiana at the front, surrounded not by the shadows of her past but by the light of hard-won connection. In that moment, she was neither Sergeant Moore nor Spectre. She was simply Kiana, unranked, unbroken, unbound by others' definitions. Spectre rises. Was it ever about the 14 seconds that made her famous, or the years of silence that made her strong? If this story of hidden strength resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of extraordinary people reclaiming their power against impossible odds.